now, everybody. So we were having some audio issues earlier in the day. Hopefully that is better now. Let's see if everybody is following. Okay, there we go. So now there is sound. Trying a new thing here with our control system. So sometimes this is a little bit funky, and I'm getting a funny echo. Anyway, Travis is going to join us as soon as he can. Let's just dive into some of the questions that we got earlier here. Uh, First, about the Honda concepts. Oh, here we go. Here's Travis.
Hey, Alex.
So, what do you think about the Honda Zero Series sedan concepts? I think it's peculiar.
The saloon is large, and it looks large. I don't know how large it actually is, but the dimensions seem strange. There's a lot of body to it, and while I generally prefer a sedan over an SUV, I'm definitely leaning towards preferring that SUV. It's much more conventional, and yeah, and the saloon looks like it would never come to production. So that's kind of the other curious part, is it doesn't seem like something they would actually go build.
To be honest, I don't think either of these is actually going to make it to production somehow. They just they look a little weird, too weird.
Neither do I, but one seems much closer to a production vehicle, and one seems much more concept-y. And then my question about the concept is, what are you going to do with it? How close is this new direction going to be to what you're putting out there? I don't know. It was a little strange.
And why do we have this and the Afeela? I don't know if I'm Afeela-ing either of these things somehow.
If I had to pick one, I might lean towards the Afeela, just because it's I guess closer to conventional, and we don't really have a lot of information about the Zero Series, right? It's just, hey, this is our Zero Series.
You know what I would go for, though? I would go for a Passport, the new Passport. Just jam a battery under that thing.
I mean, I would go for a Honda E, but that's just me.
What I will never understand the rationale behind this, or the why not of this. But seriously, why not just stick a battery in something you've already got?
I will be the first to say I think the Ridgeline is primed for a plug-in hybrid variant. Obviously, like, Honda doesn't have any of that tech in production right now. I would assume they've got stuff that works, but if you're going to do something different, take a vehicle that you already have that's a little bit different, like the Ridgeline. Just embrace it. Just dive into it.
Yeah, I mean, Hyundai and Genesis and Kia to a lesser extent, but in the past they've proved that you can do this. Then it's totally fine. I mean, Ford Lightning is just an F-150 with a battery jammed underneath. The Kona electric, regular Kona, battery underneath. We had a Soul EV, it's still available here and there. The Genesis lineup's got a bunch of EVs that are just battery jammed underneath. Like, why can't we just do that, Honda? I don't understand that one.
To be fair, I think Genesis has done a really good job of managing that. Take something we already have and stick a battery in it. I mean, I think they've done a phenomenal job, and better than most other manufacturers.
BMW, for instance, too. You just recently had the i4. Same thing. It's just a 4 Series battery underneath. I don't know.
True.
Speaking of battery underneath something, let's go back up to this other question here, because we will be driving the Wagoneer soon. So when is that? When are we driving that?
We are driving that not this coming week, but end of the week afterwards.
That's right. I don't know when we're going to tell everybody else about it, but that is when we are driving it. Yeah, I'm super curious to see how this goes, and why Wagoneer? Why didn't they just call it electric Grand Cherokee? Because that's basically what it is.
Yeah,
it is the new platform from too. So
I have a question about Wagoneer in general. Sort of why does it exist on its own? So to dive in, or to stretch the Wagoneer name even further. Also, Wagoneer S seems interesting, because obviously there is not a current Wagoneer competitor in the size segment. Is S, obviously S for sporty? We all know that, but is S the new note for these EVs? And is it going to be sporty enough to sport the S?
I think they're just trying. I think the origin story of the Wagoneer S thing, part of it was some sort of contest thing, as I recall. But then there's also a little bit of trying to make fetch happen in wanting Wagoneer to be this sub-brand, this extra thing. And obviously the Wagoneer S is going to be more expensive than a regular Grand Cherokee, so maybe that helps justify some of it. I'm not entirely clear. I don't get why not just call it a Grand Cherokee EV. Like GM has completely unrelated Blazer EV, Equinox EV, Silverado EV. Seems like it's just fine for them. Like this pairing though is too far off. We got huge Wagoneer, and then you got Wagoneer S, which is not a Wagoneer.
No. But it's good looking, and hopefully it's fun to drive. So, but naming conventions are weird, right? Why do we have brand new nameplates and then revising old nameplates? I mean, it's not as bad as something like the Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross. So I guess there's
the total eclipse of the Cross.
Oh boy, yeah. On that note, I'm going to drop out for just a second because somehow I completely minimized this window and I can't find it. So give me 1 second. I'll jump back in.
Travis will be back in a moment, and then he can sound in on whether or not the Tasman or the Aztec is the ugliest thing he's seen. You know, I think they're both pretty hideous, to be honest. I don't know which is worse. Maybe because it's newer, the Tasman might be worse. The Tasman is so close to being okay. If they just put regular wheel arches on it, I think they could make it work. It's probably fine for North America, since we know North America is not going to get the Tasman. They were pretty upfront by that. I would assume that if Kia decided that we finally would get a truck here, it would be readjusted for our market. And it could be easily, because it would have to be built in North America. It could not be built in the factory where it's being built there. I don't know. What do you think? Aztec or Tasman? Which is uglier?
Oh, probably the Aztec.
It's close. It's a tough one.
Yeah, it's just because the Tasman, if you zoom out and you put the fuzzy filter over it, you go, oh, that's an SUV. And the Tasman is kind of the same thing, but I think the fuzzy image would look better on the Tasman than it does on the Aztec. So if it's a draw, I'm going the Aztec's probably a little uglier. Yeah,
it's a tricky one.
Is there a winner? You know, that's the question. Is there a winner here?
Yeah, it's hard to say. So this is Gio's asking, what are your thoughts on the standardization of EV plugs? Do you think Ford will gain access to the Tesla network? Well, Ford already has access. They were the first to get access to the supercharger network. But not all of the supercharger network, because we're still in this transition phase, and the old V1 and V2 stations in Tesla's network are not available for anybody but Teslas to use because of standards incompatibility.
Confirm.
The V3 and V4 stations, not all V3s, it seems like almost all V3s though at this point, because there was a rollout process. So almost all V3s, all the V4s should be able to be used with the other EVs. I don't know. General thoughts on this one. I actually think that it was stupid to not use the plug that's in Europe in North America, but you know, hey, whatever. This is what we've got. What do you think?
Indeed. And I think if I recall, NACS is going to make possible the bring your own cable solution, right? I mean, that's
it's not part of the NACS thing. That's J3400. So we do have to, I guess, back up that one a tiny bit. Yeah, because the what we're calling NACS, generally speaking, if I can, you know, there's the Tesla plug thing, and J3400 looks a lot like this, and is mechanically compatible with the Tesla standard plug. But there are some important changes, and and some of this is just sort of the standard building around it. Because Tesla had a proprietary standard, Tesla's connector supported whatever Tesla wanted to do. I mean, if Tesla wanted to support plugging into an elephant tomorrow, you could have done that, right? Because it's completely under their control.
At least next week, maybe not tomorrow.
Yeah. The problem now going forward, and this is actually where part of me kind of wishes maybe it was still just under Tesla's control, which maybe sounds weird, but the problem with a agreed upon standard that's set by a standards body, which is what J3400 is, and the thing that everybody has signed on to, is that the SAE will control it, and they're the ones that have created the published standards, and other manufacturers will have input for changes over time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It means that this standard is kind of set in stone. It will be very slow to change. And what's baked in is baked in, kind of. It was easier for Tesla to make changes over time with their standards because they controlled everything.
Autocracy is very efficient, but can be very flawed. And democracy is the opposite.
Exactly. And I will say the big difference, and the reason we don't find the J3400 connector outside of North America, and we never will, it is going to be a North American only standard, is because it does not support three-phase charging. And by and large, three-phase charging is more the norm than the exception in Europe, where it's the complete opposite in North America. Most people charge their cars at home, generally speaking, although that's starting to change. We're seeing more workplace charging. And in North America, generally speaking, you don't have three-phase power at home. It's just not an option. But generally speaking, in Europe, you do, and it makes more sense. It's more efficient to do three-phase charging as far as conductors and conductor sizing, et cetera. So that's why they have the bigger, chunkier Menkes connector. In Europe, it's got a lot more pins. And that's why we're never going to see a global standard here. And then China's gone in their other direction, in their own direction, because China wants real fast charging. And for that, you need bigger, chunkier connectors. But that new GBT thing, I don't know if you've seen that, Travis, like the connectors, it's this huge, chunky square thing.
I haven't. I will say, the other day I was talking to somebody who said, "Oh, what do you do?" And I told them, "Well, I'm work with cars." And they said, "I heard that China's got a 500-mile EV that'll charge all the way up in 10 minutes, and it's only $10,000." And I said, "Where do I start?"
Yeah. No, but it's going to be more believable. They have some of these things,
pieces of it for sure.
Pieces of it. Yeah. But the new GBT standard there is going to support up to 1,500 kilowatt, 1.5 megawatt charging. That's bonkers.
It is. I mean, that's industrial, really.
Right.
When we look at an EV and its applications, that's your semi trucks, your big haulers, your work equipment that needs for duty cycle to be able to charge that quickly. I'm on board with fast charging, but I really do think for most cases, 200, 250 kilowatts is already pretty good for most people in most situations.
Yeah, the Neo ET9 will charge up to 600 kilowatts, which
That's
is
cranking.
And the new connector there currently supports up to 900 kilowatts with the future proofing to 1.5. So we're talking significantly faster than any EVs sold in North America, which is kind of cool. So
it is.
Let's
and then we can have smaller batteries, sort of.
Let's talk to Harold here. Harold's asking why we can't have the Tasman here. Sadly, we just can't have nice things in North America. But the real reason is if you don't build a light truck in North America, which for practical legal sense in the U.S. means only Mexico, Canada, or the U.S., even though actually there's quite a lot of North America south of there. If you don't build it in these three countries, it has to incur a 27.5% import tariff. And that just means it's financially unviable to build a small truck outside the U.S. That's why we don't get the Volkswagen small trucks or those adorable little ones you find in South America, et cetera. It's just, it's not practical to build a separate factory for that here, and importing is just not an option. So that's
the closest you'll get is to go near the border, and every once in a while you get a cute thing that crosses over. I think last time I was in San Diego, I saw a Ram 700. Absolutely adorable, but not for us.
So Chris is asking about Lexus GX and LX interior quality and design. This is something I think both of us complained about when we saw, especially the GX. I think the LX is better, and we'll be seeing the hybrid here soon. But yeah, GX is not the snazziest interior.
The only thing I'll add to this is that my concerns with the quality and design are separate, because I don't think it's a bad quality interior. I don't think it's poorly made, and I don't think it's poorly implemented, and I don't think the materials are garbage, but it doesn't feel quite like you're getting your money's worth. And it seems like a noticeable departure from what they've been doing the last few years.
Yeah, and
it almost feels Audi-fied in a way.
Yeah, there are definitely some cost-cutting measures there. I will say on my side, Lexus has been known for beautifully lacquered wood trim, just dripping with wood, etc., and that's expensive. I don't think they could have said this with a straight face, but I am surprised that Lexus didn't try to say this was an environmental move to not cut down a tree, because GX and LX are not efficient. But they could have tried to spin it, and they didn't. They just just didn't.
Yep.
This is a good one. Which legacy car company do you think is doing the most to manufacture and sell EVs? I would say it's probably a strong tie between Hyundai and General Motors.
Yeah, they're kind of two different directions. General Motors is going, they've been going very hard one direction very clearly. I think the Hyundai group has been a little more sporadic, but in a way that they say, hey, we're going to try these things, which one of these sticks, and then we'll kind of go that direction. And I think they probably got ahead because of that strategy. I think GM has a lot of things coming, but they're still on their way, where the Hyundai group has a lot more things that are already on the way. What's missing is the bigger, heavier duty vehicles. Kia EV9 versus Cadillac IQ, two very different concepts, but
my push for GM would be GM is trying to corner every market segment possible, right? Because they've got not one, not two, but 3 electric pickup trucks for whatever reason. We've got Blazer, we've got Equinox, then we have the Caddies. So we currently have Lyric on sale, but this month or next month, Optic and Vistic are starting on sale. And then we're going to have Escalade IQ on sale. And then we're going to get the electric, Suburbans and Tahoes and everything else. And Bolt. The Bolt's getting resurrected.
Yeah, lots of questions, but yes, that's what we hear.
And then we have the Celestiq. And then we have the Celestiq convertible, which we all know is coming. So they're trying to push everything that's gas. They want an electric something there. I think Hyundai and Kia have been a bit more strategic in the things that they've tried, and they're a little bit trying to go a little bit more modern with GV60, EV6, etc. But they're trying to corner quite as many segments all at the same time.
Right, and I think when you look at some of like the GV80, you say, hey, the G80, GV80, we're going to do not the hybrid, but we're going to take what we have and make something work with it. We're going to do something from the ground up. I think they've been a little more open to trying those things. And that's why I do think they've got their foot in the door a little earlier, even though GM, in the folder has more options at the moment.
Yeah. Let's move down to the super chats here. Thanks for Harold for that. And let's move on to Daryl. Oh, we just answered your question. So
that's
good
we did.
For that too. I will say the second part of here, pardon me. Subaru on the dedicated EV thing. Obviously, it's going to be a dedicated shared Toyota platform because of Subaru and Toyota's tie-in. Mazda, it's most likely going to be something similar because remember, Subaru is about 20% owned by Toyota. Toyota's interest in Mazda is smaller, but still significant. They're the largest single shareholder, as I recall, in Mazda.
I think so.
But Toyota's EV plans are really slow rolled. So expect more hybrids sooner than full EVs from those manufacturers. That's the general thought there. Brad is asking, should I buy a Prius Prime this year or wait to see what PHEVs GM is going to offer in the next few years? You have a Prius Prime coming soon here, right, Travis?
I had the Prius Prime just a little bit ago. Should have a larger video on that dropping soon. But the question is, how quickly do you need your car, Brad? Because we have no information from General Motors at this time.
Yeah.
It would only take, when we hear this is the model on the way, it's usually within 2 years. But we haven't even heard rumblings of what it might be. We've got guesses on what gets the PHEV treatment first. But what I can tell you is I would not expect the first PHEVs to be a Trax, option, and that would be the closest in size and function to something like the Prius Prime. So if that's kind of up your alley, I'd say you're pretty safe buying that one. And it'll be a few more years until GM has it. And if you're curious, you're not sure you want to commit, then that's what a lease is for.
Yep. Peter asks a question that actually we were just discussing, strangely enough, yesterday, which is the e-all-wheel drive system. And it's worth noting that the Toyota e-all-wheel drive hybrid system is very similar to what we find in certain Ford hybrids, Lincoln actually, technically, as well as the Mazda CX-50, since it uses a Toyota hybrid system. There are a few other e-all-wheel drive hybrids out there, but this concern is more specific to Toyota's setup. And that is no. The easy answer is no. It's not going to be as capable in snow or mild off-roading as a mechanical all-wheel drive system. And the main reason for that is the size of the battery pack. So when you look, for instance, at a Volvo plug-in hybrid, or actually to a slightly different extent, the Prime, the RAV4 Prime, it's a bit more capable in that model, because in order for a Toyota regular hybrid to generate power and send power to the rear, the front tires end up spinning as well, because you have to dig your foot deeper into the accelerator pedal. The battery cannot drive a 90 horsepower rear motor on its own. It's just too small. And so it depends on the engine revving up to generate power to go to the back and help you out. In snow and mud especially, this means that instead of the front tires just chirping a little bit and then power going to the rear and then everybody trying to dig out, you have the front tires digging further in because they're now spinning up even though they don't have traction. And this is especially tricky in sand, where that's a really bad idea. And to a slightly lesser extent, mud, and a slightly lesser extent than that, snow. But it's still the same problem because you got some melting going on. You're not going to have snow packing into the tires as well to help improve traction. So a conventional all-wheel drive system is definitely going to be more capable. But there are hybrids to choose from out there that will still have a mechanical all-wheel drive system. The Ford, the Hyundai, the Kia, and the Honda systems currently offered will have a regular mechanical all-wheel drive system. So that's probably the direction I would go in. And even if you're not stuck, you will notice that the Toyota e-all-wheel drive system is more prone to torque steer, especially in snow. So if you dig a little bit too deeply into it and one wheel slips, you're going to get that steering wheel tug. And even if it can send power to the rear, it's still going to have that feel. The opposite side of that on the e-all-wheel drive system that I should mention here is, for instance, if you got a Volvo XC90 plug-in hybrid or an XC60 plug-in hybrid, the reason they don't have this problem is because they have a really big battery. And so that battery can deliver 100-something horsepower to the rear motor without the engine doing anything. And that means in those hybrids, you can set the car to constant all-wheel drive, and it's going to balance power front and rear all the way up to till a combined about 350 horsepower or so. So it's going to feel much more sure-footed, much more like a traditional dual motor EV than not. And then, of course, one step up from there would be more of a traditional locking mechanical all-wheel drive system, which is going to feel more traditional, more sure-footed than any dual motor setup. So
I think my question there, Alex, if you're just doing general driving in snow, so there's a little bit of snow on the road, there's a little bit of snow in the driveway, but you're not really doing any serious off-roading, you're not going to be stuck in snow regularly. Um, do you have any concerns about an all-wheel drive, or is it, hey, that'll get me going when I need to? I understand, it's the
Mhm.
digging piece of it, but first of all, if you see it very rarely, I'd say, yeah, all-wheel drive is great, no problem. But if you're not going to be fighting through it regularly, would you have any concerns?
Yeah, it sort of depends on where you live and how willing you are to change your tires out. I would also remind everybody that tires are a huge part of this. And if you put some really great snow tires, like you stick Blizzaks on your Toyota all-wheel drive hybrid, you're going to feel better in almost every situation versus a regular RAV4 with just all seasons on it, because the all season tires aren't going to stop or go around a corner as well as a dedicated winter tire would. So that's always something that should be kept in mind. But all things being equal, the all-wheel drive system is not going to be as capable.
Right.
But the reality is that there are plenty of things you can do to improve traction there. This is a good opinion piece here. Is Tesla more of a Chinese company headquartered in America, like Honda is an American company headquartered in Japan? I would argue no, because Tesla designs more of their stuff in the US, even though they do sell a lot in China, and China is very, very important. I would say they're more an internally conflicted 50-50 company at this point, in a way.
I think they could become that, but they're definitely not that right now.
Yeah.
They were a California company for a long time, and now they're very clearly not a California company,
They're
even though
still
a lot of
basically
cars are still
California.
built in California.
And yeah.
So I think there are other companies that are, clearly headquartered somewhere else. Well, you look at something like Mini Cooper, and people go, oh, that's a British car, and it's absolutely not.
Mhm.
But Tesla is still an American company for now. Things could
Mhm.
change, but especially since they aren't doing different market vehicles again for
Right.
the moment. I think that's part of what I would, if they start switching over, and it would make sense that one of the first out of market or market specific vehicles they do is for China.
Mhm.
At that point, I'd say you're getting closer, but there are Fords and Chevys that are China specific vehicles, so that in and of itself does not make it an overseas company.
Right.
Plus, the only reason China, I think, right now is getting that updated Model Y first is because that's where they're being built at the moment. So it just
Got to start
logically
somewhere.
speaking, you roll them out off the line and right into the market instead of putting them on a boat and waiting.
Yeah, I will say that when we look at Tesla's lineup as well, for instance, the lineup is more centered on North American tastes and interests, which, mind you, do actually have a synergy with Chinese market tastes. So if we look at international conglomerates, generally speaking, cars there's more of a harmony and more of a synchronicity between cars designed for China and designed for the US than designed for the rest of Asia and Europe, for instance. So we, for instance, in the US get the bigger versions of certain Volkswagen platforms. We get the stretched Volvo S90, for instance. Volvo's like, yeah, give them the long one. We'll do the short one somewhere else, that kind of thing. But we don't see that design just for China that we see out of other models from other companies. This is an interesting one. Do you see a future for VinFast? My first thought is just it depends on how much money the owner wants to spend, and of course how much money Vietnam wants to spend. But also, who would buy them?
So YouTubers have bought them as interesting experiments.
I mean, who would buy the company if the
Who would
brand?
buy the company?
Yeah.
I can't think of anyone who would say, hey, VinFast is doing
Mm-hmm.
X way better than we are. We should pick them up and grab some IP or some production capability or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think VinFast is probably on its own, unless it has something in the works, again, on an IP scale that we don't know about, and would be interesting to some other manufacturer. But I really can't think of anyone off the top of my head who would be jumping on that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. In a wackadoodle world where I could see a corporate merger happening, in my mind, it would make more sense for VinFast and Mitsubishi to merge than for Honda and Mitsubishi to merge. I think that would be a better pairing, mainly because of Mitsubishi's decent presence in South America and other developing economies around the world. And I think that VinFast's motorcycle, previous business, et cetera, and their other developing economy work, that somehow makes more sense to me. But VinFast product line currently looks good visually, I think, but I'm not sure how much there is there. And the VF9 seems very, very heavily based on a BMW platform. VF8's a bit trickier to see. There are a lot of parts in the VF9 that are either right off of BMW or are somehow identically styled to BMW switches and stalks and controls. And of course, it's got the big transmission tunnel. That's not without basis, because up until now, VinFast's car building expertise has been building licensed BMW X5s with General Motors engines under the hood and building a few Chevys. So,
yeah. Although interesting, Mitsubishi was the only other company. I thought, well, is there maybe a reason?
And Mitsubishi couldn't afford to buy them, but they could merge.
They could rent to own type situation.
Nissan could sell the percentage of Mitsubishi they own to VinFast, which could help Nissan's bottom line in their merger with Honda, and then VinFast and Mitsubishi could get together. So,
and Alex only wants a reasonable finder's fee for this acquisition.
You heard it here first. It was my idea, so I will help chart the course there if they will only call.
And for percentage, I'll bear witness.
So BMW's X3 redesign. Do you think it's ugly, or or is just the initial consumer against the change? I don't know what the discounts really are on the X3. Discounts on X3, it's pretty normal. Let's see if there are any in our area.
Their volume model or one of them.
I think the design language is fine. I don't have a problem with that. What do you think?
So I pulled it up here, reading ahead, and I think it just looks like an X3. I mean, I recognize that it's a little more angular. And kind of a smooth angular situation, a bit of a balancing act there. The grille is a bit more pronounced because the front end is seemingly very flat.
Yeah, the flat front.
Besides that, it just looks like an X3.
The flat front and the grille seem to be what's offending some people, and then the black surround under the grille part to the main cooling ducts down there. It's a little it's a little goatee looking. It depends on the color. If it was white, I wouldn't be the biggest fan, but I'm kind of okay with the grille.
Yeah, I mean, I think depending on the pictures, the little goatee situation looks like a shadow, so you could easily pass it off. I don't think BMW missed the mark. I don't think this is some radical redesign. And I don't think X3 owners are not going to release an X3 because of it.
Yeah, and the volume model with the 2-liter turbo, it does not have the little goatee kind of thing there. It has just a complete flat, body colored front. So there are ways around it, or you could get a gray one, and then it's not going to be as obvious. But yeah, it doesn't offend me somehow.
No. Favorite, probably not, but not too controversial.
I'm debating here. I don't think that the GLC is any prettier. It's more sedate. I think the Q5 is good looking, and I think the XC60 is good looking, but the XC60 is not going to drive like an X3. So
no, it's not.
there are decisions to be made.
As in all things.
Let's move on here. Thoughts on the Model Y Juniper? We already covered that a little earlier in the episode, but recap for us. What do you think of the light bar? Are you a Cybertruck light bar fan?
I can't believe I'm going to say this. I like it much better on the Cybertruck than I do the Juniper. I just think that the Model Y is already very bubbly. The whole shape, the whole presence. And we recorded a podcast earlier. If you're not already subscribed, please feel free to do so. And we talked about it a little more closely. Alex said the headlights were not your favorite, the old ones. And I agree. They were not my favorite either, but it still felt like it fit the personality of the vehicle. So even if I didn't love it, it was more of an overall personality thing. And this light bar just feels like somebody was told to design a front end and they didn't really get an idea of what the rest of the car was. It just seems a little bit plastered on.
Yeah. It's always looked a little bit off to me because of the aerodynamic necessity of and parts commonality necessity of making it an inflated Model 3. And I'm okay with that.
Right.
If I could have wished for it to be boxier, that would make more sense because it would also make it more practical. I think we are now seeing more practical, more boxy alternatives finally to the Model Y. It'll be interesting to see if this refresh can keep sales going on, because sales did drop for the first time in Tesla's history in 2024. And I think that the ubiquity of the Model Y, it's everywhere. It's the Camry now, right? And the increasing practicality and options that we find in the competition. Like, we have a Blazer because we're like, this deal is too good to pass up. Also, is it even real? I'm not the biggest fan of the Blazer. It doesn't handle as well as the Model Y. It feels huge and heavy. But on the other hand, on the inside, it is huge compared to a Model Y. I mean, that cargo area is gigantic. It has a ton more legroom than a Model Y. So it sort of depends on exactly what you're after. But then Model Y wouldn't be as efficient with the range that it has if it wasn't a jelly bean. So,
right, if it didn't have everything pulled in, and so like actually the front end reminds me a bit more of the new Prius and like the Crown Signia, just that smooth front end. What I will say is that as much as I don't really love the front, actually looking closer at the back end, it feels like it pulls everything in real tight. And I don't think that works because it kind of looks like a dog taking a squat. Just how the visual piece of it just makes it all one piece. And the big one that I'm looking through images here, and we obviously do not have a North American release. And it's hard to tell. I saw somebody say that it still had stocks, so turn signal and drive stocks. But in these photos, I'm not seeing them. So that would be one I'd want to double check on. But
I believe that was in what little of a press release there was there that still had stocks. And the screen got ever so slightly bigger inside. So it's 15.4, not 15 inches. So relatively modest changes. Drew's asking about thoughts on the optic and when is the media drive. The media drive is in February, as I recall. More details to come. We'll also be driving the Escalade IQ, and the Vistic will happen a little bit later. So the optic is going to be on sale real soon. If you're looking for a luxury Equinox, optic's your man. Bear in mind, it is going to be roughly similar to the Model Y in some dimensions, but a little tighter inside. So you will notice that Optic and Lyric are kind of bookending Model Y size-wise. Optic is a little bit smaller. Lyric is a decent amount bigger. I think the seats in the Optic were more comfortable the limited amount of time I've been able to spend in it. Lyric seats are a little on the flat side, a little kind of strangely arranged. It's going to charge slow, though.
Yeah, I mean, that's if you're built on a more affordable product, something like an Equinox, then there are going to be some compromises, and That's going to be one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Which really only matters if you're doing a lot of longer distance driving, but still worth noting.
Yep. And in a way, I think if you do a lot of long distance driving, you'll either learn to like it or accept it.
Mm-hmm.
I would assume that the occasional road tripper is going to be more offended by it somehow, because they're going to, that first time, they're going to, ooh, I need to go see grandma. Whoops, that's not going to work.
Oh, man.
Harold's asking, what do we think of the Afeela? I think we covered this one a little bit earlier, but just to recap here, I'm not Afeela in it.
And I'm not affording in it. So.
Yeah. There's just nothing about the Afeela that is wowy anymore. And it's not even because it's taking so long, because it was announced some time ago. I think even if it had been on time, it would be a nothing burger. The 300-mile range is fine. Mm-hmm. The charging is unconscionably slow for a new EV. The screen's totally cool. Software, I played with it. Really snappy, great. Is that enough to spend $100,000 on a Sony Honda? I just don't know.
I mean, in general, I do think it's a fairly attractive vehicle, so that's mm-hmm. a plus. And there aren't a whole lot of other vehicles that can say "Have a nice day" to other drivers or people as they walk by. I will say I appreciate that this is not Honda's only direction they're going for electric vehicles. That one mm-hmm. I will put out there, right? Because obviously we have the Prologue, so that relationship with General Motors. They have their Zero Series, their own. Here's what we're working on. We've already seen. I believe it was the Acura performance concept, performance EV concept, and this. So they have their hands in a lot of different little projects, and mm-hmm. maybe it is a bit of seeing what sticks, but at least this is good looking. But is it more attractive or more appealing than something like a Lucid? That I don't think so.
Let me put it this way. If the Afeela was $50,000, exactly as we see, mm-hmm. and had an Acura logo on it, mm-hmm. I'd be all in.
See, I was thinking 60. I could do 60 maybe.
I couldn't do 60 because it's not that big inside. It's smaller than a Accord, really. So we're talking Model 3. Like, would you be okay with a $60,000 Model 3?
Depends on what it did or what it has with it. I think that's going to be the thing. It's not so much what does it have in numbers, because obviously it's not going to be the highest driving range. It's not going to be a performance monster. It's not going to be the fastest charging. But mm-hmm. what's the experience that it provides? And
there's no talk about tax credit eligibility. So it's going to be at least $7,500 more than anything that will qualify.
Sure. As things still qualify.
Yeah. If and when that, we'll see,
but pricing wise, it would be too expensive anyway, right?
This is an intriguing question here, because you just drove the i4.
I did.
And when I drove the Polestar 2 the first time, I did say it reminded me of what would happen if BMW had to make a car and they only had access to Volvo parts. Mm-hmm. And I would say that is still the case, but it is smaller than an i4. So I would say it feels more like an electric 2 Series Grand Coupe than an i4. So if BMW had an i2, it would be believable.
Yeah, I did just post the i4 versus the Model 3, which is everything's compared to a Model 3. Mm-hmm. And someone said, why not consider the Polestar? And I was like, because the Polestar's size just really doesn't actually put it in that same category. But functionally, they do feel very similar. The thing about the Polestar, though, is I think they do a little bit better job with the space they have, because there are definitely some compromises in that i4. Not that it's not a great car, and from the driver's seat, I don't think you care about how much room there is or isn't in the back, or mm-hmm. does it have a front trunk? Like, those are not the important things for the driver. But as an overall package, I think Polestar does a little bit better with the space, because it was designed from the beginning to be electric.
Yeah. Let's see here. So Land is saying drives 350 miles away between work locations 6 days a week. Ooh, 350. Eek, out. That is a That is a tricky one because that's a lot of daily miles, and that in pretty much anything that would mean a DC fast charge at least
And it's
once
all
a day.
highway. I mean, you can't be doing that many miles
Yeah.
in a work day. Actually, I think you're leaning towards a Lucid.
I think that,
Towards
I
one
mean,
of
if
the
you can
Lucid
afford one, that would
sedans.
be probably the best. I mean, otherwise you're
Yeah.
you're Tesla-ing. That's
Or
probably going to be
getting
the
a
easiest.
real big battery GM truck.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with the big battery GM truck is charging it at night to get another 350 out of it the
Oh yeah,
next
you need
day.
your 19.2 at home, and it'd be a maybe.
Yeah, that would be tricky.
Yeah.
Billy's question, this is a good one here. We have not been invited so far to review any of the Chinese EVs that are there, but who knows? We may be buying an EX30. So that's a adorable Chinese EV.
Oh boy.
So stay tuned on that one. We still have to figure out how the deal is going to go down. We recently bought a used C40, which currently is up there with Travis, and we did that because I didn't think the EX30 was ever going to happen. The Chinese tariffs and the delay and change in manufacturing, et cetera, got everything kind of up in the air, and then all of a sudden it turned up. So we'll see.
Yeah.
Let's see here. What's our opinion on people wanting more hybrids and plug-in hybrids?
Good.
I think it's
good.
fine.
I think there are a lot of positives with a hybrid
Mhm.
or a plug-in hybrid versus a standard internal combustion. If anything, if you build the hybrid correctly, or this is the focus of it. I kind of look at it as a hybrid as being able to supplement like a turbocharger. When you look at,
Mhm.
hey, what did turbocharging do? It means you do smaller engines and you can get more power out of it. If you get a hybrid, you can do a little more torque if depending on what you're doing with that electric motor. Obviously, you can get much better fuel economy, especially around town. Plug-in hybrid
Mhm.
is definitely a great performance enhancer.
Yeah.
If again, that's the direction you want to go, but that's a good way to add performance to a vehicle without sacrificing fuel economy and again potentially increasing fuel economy. It's not one for one, but I think in most cases in people's everyday driving, that's probably a good thing. But there's going to be more hybrids and plug-in hybrids before everything's EV. And again, who knows? Everything probably won't be EV in the next
Mhm.
10, maybe even 20 years. There's going to be specific applications that just don't make sense for it. But it's all moved towards some sort of electrification.
Yeah, I will say, it's going to be a long time, truly, until we see a electric vehicle comparably equipped and sized uh, to a hybrid that is priced like the hybrid. Like,
Mhm.
we do not see an EV that is as boxy as a RAV4 and as practical as a RAV4 with 8 inches of ground clearance for $28,000, $30,000. We're a long way off of an all-wheel drive EV being able to do that with 400 miles of range. And the more mainstream that product gets, the more likely it is to be purchased by someone that has less capability to charge at home. EVs are generally bought, like honestly, most new cars, unfortunately or fortunately, depending how you want to look at it, are purchased by relatively wealthy people that live in suburbia. They don't live in urban America. They don't live in rural America. They're suburbanites that are single family homeowning, etc. And that's going to be a lot easier to integrate home charging into your life. As we look down the cost lineup in new cars, that's where we see more people that are urban dwellers or rural dwellers or people that don't own their home, they're renters or whatever. And that group, it's going to be harder for them to be able to charge an EV at home unless they can get their apartment building or their condo complex or whatever to install charging solutions for them. So I see there being a big place still for hybrids and plug-in hybrids for quite some time, rationally. And the reality is
Well,
you need to meet customers where they are as well. not everybody, for whatever reason, there's obviously a lot of political pushback, but you need to meet them where they are with an option that maybe they will find acceptable, and then hope that they can make a different choice the next time.
I just pulled up a chart that you and I got to look at the other day, which is projections or anticipated breakdowns from a manufacturer on hybrid versus EV versus PHEV adoption, and it looks like till about 2031 the expected increase in hybrid adoption before things start to phase down, and that's when you start seeing anticipated for EVs to be climbing. So that's still a little ways away.
Yeah. This is an interesting one. So on the plug-in side of things, I think the Range Rover Sport plug-in hybrid is fine. I like the plug-in hybrid system in the GLE the best. If you want to know more about that, you can obviously check out our GLC AMG video. It actually is somewhat related in terms of the design of the system, but we will be getting one of Mercedes' new plug-in hybrids in for review soon. I've only driven it very briefly. But the big thing on the Mercedes system is that it's pretty efficient and has a shockingly long range. It's a 50-mile range plug-in hybrid. So we're finally starting to see in the luxury segment these over 40-mile range plug-in hybrids that hopefully we'll see more of, because obviously it's going to be a little bit more interesting to the luxury shopper to be able to get the performance that these bigger batteries will enable, but also it's going to give these customers also a chance to drive electric only. And we do see seemingly that plug-in hybrids are sort of the EV gateway drug, especially, for instance, the original Volts. For instance, a lot of Volt shoppers ended up going to an EV for their next purchase. The X5, I think, is more comfortable. I think I like the interior a bit better than the Mercedes. That's just my personal preference. I would also say that if my own money were on the line, I probably would go for something slightly smaller and less expensive and just get an XC60 plug-in hybrid. Not as much range, no DC fast charging like you find on the GLE. Admittedly, the GLE's DC fast charging is not that fast, but it does do it. But it is less expensive with solid fuel economy. And I think even though you don't have as much range, I think it's a good compromise between the two.
Of the three, I've only driven the X5, but it was a fantastic vehicle. So it's, if you're in that mix, then there's not a wrong way to go. It's just kind of what's your preference.
Get Up and Go is asking this question: In-N-Out or Dick's Burgers, and what's the to-go order or go-to order? I'll go first because I'm going to be the Philistine here and say I don't eat it either. I actually have not had a burger in a really, really long time. Burgers don't love me as much as I loved the burger in a former life. And, I need to see my grandchildren. And my doctor said, if you want to live to see your grandchildren, you need to watch your cholesterol. So no burger. But
I'm happy to answer.
Also, though, I think In-N-Out's fries are revolting.
So I stopped at In-N-Out a couple weeks ago while I was down there, and the thing is, they're not a bad burger stop, but kind of like Dick's, there's nothing terribly special about them. It's just sort of a atmosphere thing. It's hey, this is the spot. It's a fine burger, but it's not for me, it's not worth the trip. I know the closest one to me, I think, is down in Oregon, and I know people will sometimes make a drive to go In-N-Out. And I'm like, Well, I hope you're just looking for something to do that day, and that just ends up being an ending point. I will say I'm 100% between the two going to go to Dick's. I'm going to get a deluxe, a fry, and a shake. If I go crazy, it's 2 fries, but Dick's Deluxe is a good way to go.
So on the fry question, though, In-N-Out's fries. Tell us truthfully.
Yeah, they're just French fries.
But there's something wrong with them because they're not just a regular French fry. Do
you feel like it's just like a very bland fry? Like technically, this is a French fry. Is that?
imagine a really, really soft styrofoam that you colored yellow and fried. And everybody has an excuse for In-N-Out fries. Like I have very, very good friends that are over the moon with In-N-Out, and they think it's the biggest sacrilege to diss or question their fry.
There's
And
always a
they're like,
line.
have you tried having them extra cooked, extra crispy? And I'm like, yes, I did. Then they were burnt. That was bad. There's just the only thing that could make an In-N-Out fry worse, In-N-Out fry, is if it was in Canada and they jammed some gravy on it. Because poutine is
animal
the
style.
only thing worse.
You just get your fries animal style, and then you're dealing with a real heck of a mess.
Sorry,
I will say the Dick's
Canadian friends.
fries are real floppy, but they taste good, so yeah, I'll take it.
And the correct answer is no. Chick-fil-A is evil, so you should just never Chick-fil-A. I haven't eaten one in 23 years, and I feel fine. And Crosstrek versus Tucson plug-in hybrid for gravel roads. Which will get squeaky first? That is an interesting way to ask that question.
Yeah.
If I live on a gravel road, and actually very, very little gets squeaky, mind you, but I will say Tucson, if you're worried about longevity, does have a much longer powertrain warranty. Also, Tucson's plug-in hybrid system is just better.
And there is no Crosstrek plug-in hybrid system, so depends on what you need it for. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Oh, wow. The Model Y makes this person think of a GMC Pacer.
Let me do a quick search.
Oh, wow. Oh, damn. Travis is younger than he looks, apparently. If someone thought he knew what a Pacer was like.
No, I remember, but it's not of my generation, so I will have to disagree.
Why is there no Q8 review on the channel? The last time the Q8 doesn't sell terribly well. Last time it came through, I don't remember exactly why not, but we'll probably see it if it gets redesigned again. We do have Q8 e-tron videos on the channel, mind you, and the entire SUV lineup there is getting renamed, so we don't know what the future of the gasoline Q8 really is in Audi's new lineup scheme. Odd numbers are going to be gas, even numbers are electric. So we'll have a Q4 and a Q6 e-tron and a Q8 e-tron, and then fill in the things on each side. And John is correct. Wendy's fries are delicious and infinitely better than an In-N-Out fry.
Okay, but I'll just jump in. McDonald's and Burger King. The McDonald's fry is the one that you eat if you have nothing to dip it in. If you have anything to dip it in, go with the Burger King.
See, I can resist a fry. I don't need a fry somehow. But if I was forced to fry,
some of us just don't have the willpower. Thank you.
If I was forced to fry and forced to choose, Wendy's is up there. I would probably go for a Carl's Jr. fry. I think Carl's Jr. is best.
Not sure I've never had a Carl's Jr.
And then we'll go with this one on the Danny thing. Incorrect. Fighting words here. Plenty of places use fresh whole cut potatoes, and they're not revolting.
I mean, Five Guys is a good burger.
Yeah, and I tried the well done thing. Then they're just burnt. Don't try and feed me a burnt fry. In-N-Out.
By the way, never order Five Guys anything other than small fry, because you get the fries and then a scoop of fries and then half a bag of fries to go with it. So small is plenty.
Yeah, don't know. Let's see. Let's move along to move down one of these lists here. I know you want an R3, but this is
I've thought about it.
Will they be outdated by the time they come to the market?
Ooh, if they weren't so software dependent, that's possible. But the beauty of those designs is that they are mostly just screens. And so as long as aesthetically it doesn't look, any particularly dated way,
battery tech,
software and interface and those sorts of things can get updated.
Battery tech can't be, though. So what do you think?
That's true. And I would say there's a chance, because Rivian is still the startup, the most recent startup of, well, and Lucid, to be fair, but Rivian's on its own there. So yes, they could be a little bit behind in a couple of those categories, but like, will the whole vehicle itself be outdated? Not necessarily. We still have cars on the road right now that are using outdated engines, but it doesn't mean the product is outdated, you know?
I will say we just got the R1T in, the tri-motor, which is the one I was really interested in. If everybody recalls, we actually owned a quad motor R1T. We had one of the first ones that was sold, and they're pretty decent improvements, really, between the two. Obviously, the software has had some decent changes, but Rivian also spent, I would say, more time than I had expected actually tweaking other things substantially under the hood. You know, reducing wiring count, improving efficiency. They swapped out the old loud air conditioning compressor, and changed the lighting, etc. So they made enough of an improvement that even though the new R1T looks shockingly like the old R1T, I would say it's not outdated, and it's actually, I almost hesitate to say this, it's the best. I think it's still the best EV truck in America. You're going to get a lot of range, greater efficiency in it than in the Cybertruck. I honestly don't see a reason to buy a Cybertruck over the Rivian.
Because people won't look at you the same. You know, that's the Rivian's going to be a little more subtle. But that is also one of the things I like about it. If I was picking an EV truck right now, it would probably be the Rivian. And now that they've got a bunch of different powertrain options, you can get as much power as you need or want, and good battery pack options as well. I mean, I think that's one of the only thing really holding back the Lightning is that it's on the smaller battery, smaller range side of things compared to some of these other up and comers.
The battery pack is a little bit smaller on the Rivian, but the range is very good. So the max pack range is over 400 miles of range. So, you know, definitely very good. And I'm surprised on the same test loop where we ran our Rivian, again, first generation quad motor, we averaged 2.1 approximately miles per kilowatt hour in that one on that test run in the regular drive mode, not conserve. In this tri-motor model, which has the same tire size, relatively similar in curb weight, but it has Rivian's in-house designed more efficient motors and improved control systems. We averaged yesterday we did the run 2.4 miles per kilowatt hour. So it's actually a very significant improvement. It's about 15% improvement or so. So they have made some definitely big improvements there. This is an interesting one. Acura ADX. We don't have any pricing, mind you. It's going to be similar to the Integra. Did Acura do enough on it?
It's not it's not overwhelming, right? Is it underwhelming? I think it's close. I think they put in another product. If you look at what it is the Integrified HRV. Just like the Civic is the Acura Integra, right? I think it'll sell well, and it's going to bring some people in. If anything, unfortunately, I think it'll probably hit some Integra sales, and my hope there is that Integra holds on. It's not as different, and I don't particularly love the lines of the HRV. Just the overall shape is a little bit funky for me, and even though the Acura gets more angular, it carried over some of that general shape, and I was hoping I would see something a little bit different, but they do have a funky, cool, like dual spoiler option that does change it. It'll come in. I think it'll do fairly well, but what it's missing is something that distinguishes it from the rest of these entry-level, entry-level CUVs. But to start, I think it's not a bad start.
Here's the thing, though. ADX, or would you Mazda CX-30?
Oh, probably for the dollar, I'd stick with that CX-30.
I'm going to guess that there's going to be a reasonable amount of overlap, because CX-30 does get on the pricey side. But it's going to have probably something like 50, 60 more horsepower. It has a much bigger engine.
Mhm.
And that 2.5-liter turbo has been a really good thing for Mazda. And I think that's my problem in a way with the ADX. We have to reserve rights because we haven't driven it yet, mind you. But I will say that the ADX firmly solidifies Acura's position as a premium, not luxury manufacturer, like we've talked before.
Right.
Because whereas MDX might compete with a Volvo XC90, it's less expensive. It's a little bit less nice here and there, but there's a rational cross shop there. I would not see a world where I would honestly cross shop ADX and XC40.
No, I don't think that'll be the case. If ADX drives really nicely, then I would be less concerned about overall power. Is it a nice vehicle to spend time in? It does have the look, and again, my personal dissatisfaction with some of the shape is just my own. But no, I'm glad Acura is doing it because it doesn't hurt to have a competitor in the segment. Really, the question I have is what vehicles is it going to draw some sales from?
Mm-hmm.
Who's choosing the Acura over the other options?
Yeah. Here's an interesting question from Drew. So since you're a Tesla owner, and Tesla loves the watt hours per mile here, what is your preference? Watt hours per mile or miles per kilowatt hour?
Oh, I would prefer they all just use the same thing, and miles per kilowatt hour makes pretty good sense to me. We always we do miles per gallon.
Right.
It's just the easier, it's all doing the same thing. Is the bigger number better? Is the smaller number better? It just kind of depends on which measurement you're using. Right now, the Volvo does kilowatt hours per 100 miles, and I'm like, why?
Because that's the European translation.
It's really easy to program in another option, and we don't. And I haven't found, and I haven't dug all the way through, but I haven't found a way to switch it. It's just this is what you have is your kilowatt hours per 100 miles. So I go, oh, okay. So I want the smaller number versus miles per kilowatt hour. We want the bigger one. So yes, I'm on the miles per kilowatt hour train,
and I am as well, primarily because that's what you buy the thing in. So
right.
The reason for me that miles per gallon makes perfect sense, and it wouldn't actually matter whether it was gallons per 100 miles or whatever. Like there's the whole statistical debate about which way that number should be presented.
Right.
But you're buying electricity gasoline in gallons, which is why I've always thought that the dumbest thing, either of these is kind of okay, but the dumber thing is the MPGE thing that you find on the window sticker, because nobody's buying their power in gallons equivalent. So that's the thing that I find dumb. I would rather that the EPA just said, like, this is how many kilowatt hours it takes to go a mile, or the reverse. And then you as the owner could calculate out, oh, okay, I drive 30 miles to work. And that would be, 10 kilowatt hours. And that would cost me 28 cents a kilowatt hour. So you could actually do the math easily. There's no regular math in your head going on with gallons equivalent. You got to go online to a stupid calculator and see that. I don't know. It seems stupid.
So my only defense of the miles per gallon equivalent is that it tells you somewhat just the efficiency of an electric powertrain versus the efficiency of a gasoline powertrain. I think that's sort of an interesting comparison. Obviously, it doesn't make it one for one.
Yeah.
My biggest frustration actually with MPGE is that it shows up on the window sticker as really the number, right? You get this and you get one range number, and nobody in the world wants to know how far you can drive in the city. They want to know how far you can drive on the highway, and we are just setting people up for frustration. So that's my biggest frustration with miles per gallon equivalent, is that it's part of a broken system.
The gallon equivalency, I think, was just misguided from the start, though, because there's no way that if you drive a Tesla and it's 100 MPGE, there is no way in an actual world we live in where you could take 1 gallon of gasoline and generate the electricity to make that thing go 100 10 miles. It is not
Right.
physically possible.
Yeah.
And that's my problem with the EPA and this stupid gallon equivalency thing, because they're looking at like, if you could combust gasoline and capture all the energy contained inside in this oxidation process, that would be equivalent to this many kilowatt hours of other energy forms. And then they take that conversion, assume it would be 100% efficient to electricity, and then they're like, ta-da! But it doesn't make any sense because you can't do that. And what owner cares? I just don't get it. Thoughts on the Crown Signia? Why didn't Toyota just go all out with the features and put a Lexus badge on it?
That's a good question.
The main reason, of course, is because the Crown brand in other markets is a thing. And I don't know. I'm kind of okay with it the way that it is. If you like the Outback and you want a more efficient hybrid with a softer ride, hey, there's a Crown Signia for you.
Without a more expensive price tag, right? Because you put the Lexus badge on it, everything does end up getting more expensive. The other argument for me is not the current generation, but the old school Land Cruiser could, brought Lexus pricing, but still had a Toyota badge. So it's not as if they haven't had, pretty expensive models that didn't seem to fit with your RAV4s and your 4Runners. It's fine by me, and I like the styling on it. So I don't think it needed to be Lexified to be an attractive model either.
Yep. Let's move over here to this is an interesting one. Charles is asking, do we think Scout will be able to sell direct to consumers? I suspect it will probably work because Volkswagen owns Scout, and I think it's hilarious. I don't know if you were in this conversation, Travis, that Scout was trying to claim that they weren't part of Volkswagen and Volkswagen had nothing to do. Like, they own 100% of Scout. Like, this is
a true American startup.
Yeah, but I think that it will probably stand in court if it goes that far and Volkswagen is willing to fight it. I don't know if it makes sense for Volkswagen to sell Scouts directly, to be perfectly honest. I think actually selling them through dealers would make more financial sense. Scout is going to be relatively low volume compared to Volkswagen, unless they see a world where they're going to start building some Golfs and Jettas and Tauses and things that are $30,000. Scout's going to be a low volume thing. I would expect it to be lower volume than Rivian, with Rivian wanting by the time Scouts are on board to have a 4 model, 5 model, depending on how you count it, lineup, right?
Yeah.
That's a tricky one. I could see Scout having some sort of modified dealer franchise arrangement in coordination with Volkswagen dealers like Polestar. Polestar is not direct sales. It is it's a very heavily modified franchise dealer agreement, but still using franchise dealers. That would make the most logical sense, because for direct sales to function, Volkswagen would also have to set up a complete service network. And service is expensive, as we've seen with some startup companies that are trying to create dealer networks in the US. It'd be the same thing, only centrally located. The Ineos dealer experience in the US is very limited. That's probably the best corollary because they're comparably priced. And the Rivian rollout still depends a lot on regional service, mobile service, things like that. And they're selling a lot more, I would assume, than Scout would in the end. And Polestar is a pretty streamlined contraption because they sold their franchise arrangements only to existing Volvo dealers, and service happens at a Volvo dealer. But the way that this works is that the Volvo dealer is kept separate. So you own a Polestar, you call or you submit the service request on your app, they come get the car goes away to a Volvo dealer, gets serviced, comes back to you, etc. That seems to make more sense.
Do you think that Scout will sell less volume than Rivian? And I guess I mean more on a model to model. So obviously R2s and R3s are going to sell in higher volumes than we get the R1s. But if you look at R1S versus Traveler and R1T versus Terra, do you really think that Scout's going to be behind? Obviously, initially, yes, but do you think? Don't you think they'll be competitive or even a little bit more?
I would assume, unless that I would assume that the market is Rivian's to lose. So unless they do something wrong, if you are not looking for a mainstream truck, that it would be Rivian's to lose. I don't really see too much of a compelling reason to go for the all-American startup, the all-American German-American startup, versus the actual all-American startup truck company. I would also assume, though, that once we get a Ram electric truck and we get a next generation Lightning, that we will see less wind in the sails of any of these, I would assume.
Yeah, I mean, the market's going to get thinner. It's going to get more spread out. I think the thing that Scout's going to have that Rivian does not, and by all accounts will not, is they're not going to have that range extender option. They're not in the engine business, and I think it's just like that chart says, it's going to be many years. It's going to be many years before the shift to full electric really takes place. And what I didn't mention, I mentioned I didn't mention percentages, but it's growing. But the plug-in hybrid segment falls much shorter or much smaller than the hybrid or the electrics. So they're in this weird middle ground. But I do think bigger, heavier duty vehicles, something like like the Ram Charger, like a Scout truck, I think those are ripe for plug-in hybrid variants. But that's something Rivian won't do.
Yeah, I am curious to see how that goes. I would argue if we live in a world where, two things. I would argue they wouldn't be directly competitive anyway, because, plug-in hybrid versus EV.
Sure.
But I will say that if Ram Charger, which is going to go on sale before Scout, if Ram Charger sales really take off, well, no, they said that Ram Charger was coming next, basically. So if Ram Charger sales really take off, then I would not be surprised if Rivian found out a way to jam a 2-liter turbo or something under that frunk, because it's got a big frunk.
Yeah.
There could be an engine there. It's really not
I'm still on board with I'm all in for the toolbox generator. Just be able to slide that into the bed, and it won't happen that way, but I'd love to see it.
Plenty of logistical challenges there, but I will say I am cautiously optimistic about the plug-in hybrid small trucks. The question for me will be when we actually see them in production and owners actually see their shitty fuel economy when they're operating in hybrid mode.
Hold on.
What are they really going to think about this? That's the question, because fuel economy is going to be below a hybrid F-150. There's no two ways about it. We already have that from Ram.
But it should be better than a non-hybrid option, or at least equivalent. And for me, I think that's the difference, is that depending on the size of the battery and your daily drive, you are very rarely going to dip into the actual gasoline engine. And then when you do, you're doing so for convenience more than anything else. So I think
that is the question.
It's not, in case anyone's wondering, Alex and I go back and forth on this all the time. But I think it's just not going to be used very often. So the convenience is going to outweigh the overall efficiency. And that's where it's going to be a better argument for owner experience.
No, I get that. My question is more like, but they're still going to use the gasoline engine, and it's still going to be less efficient. So it depends on exactly how they're using this thing. It all depends on, are they going to plug it in all the time? And that really depends more on that regular charging like an EV. And if you are regularly charging like an EV, then why not just buy the actual EV?
Flexibility.
It does give a little bit of flexibility.
It's training wheels.
Yeah.
But training wheels aren't always bad.
It's also going to be... I'm curious to see how it performs when the battery has been exhausted and you're doing truck things with it. That is an unknown that I'm eagerly anticipating the testing with the Ram Charger. Let's put it that way.
I'll throw in one caveat. Let's say big truck things, because regular truck things are driving you and your family to and from places. That's the American function of a truck, is to just move people and backpacks and picnic supplies more often than not. But what you're saying is absolutely dead on. When you need the truck to truck, what's it doing if it's running on that generator? The big question there is, instead of a tow haul mode, just have a truck button, and that truck button is what gives you a bigger reserve on the battery, and that way you don't run into truck related issues.
Yep. Brennan's point here is interesting, but also I would say debatable, Brennan, because the R1T is a very strange truck because it is as wide as a half-ton truck. It's actually wider than the Scout truck. When you look at the dimensions, the Terra is 79.9 inches wide. The Rivian's 81.8 inches wide. So it's actually wider than an F-150. And wider than a Ram 1500 in regular guise. So it sort of depends on which dimensions you are looking at. Scout is longer. It's 229 inches. So it's closer to the length of some of those others. But Hummer is 217 inches long, which is most arguably a half-ton truck. It's not a mid-size truck. And it's the same length as the R1T. So R1T is this what is it sort of thing. And I think the part that confuses people sometimes with the R1T is that not all the dimensions conform to normal segments. So the truck is 81.8 inches wide without the mirrors. So mirrors are wider, and you'll really notice that trying to put it in a parking spot. But the body, the cabin is not. So it has this Volvo-like bell shape to the body. Part of that's aerodynamics, of course. So the couple distance inside is closer than an F-150, even though the track and the body width for parking is solidly half-ton sized. And then the other parts of problems with this are payload capacity and towing capacity are truly more half-ton sized as well. So sort of what is this? It's a half-ton truck with a 4.5-foot bed's probably the best way to describe it. It's been a long time since a half-ton truck only carried half a ton.
Yep.
Because if we look this up here, Rivian's payload's 1,384 pounds in this truck. You could get up to 1,973 pounds in one trim. The dual motor, 2,161 pounds. Which means that's more payload actually in all of those trims than you'll find in a decent number of Toyota Tundra or even some Ram 1500 trims. So it's a really hard to categorize thing. But I think that blurriness is going to mean that they're going to have more competition than some people might think. Just like Cybertruck is truly quite a bit smaller than I think a lot of people think. It has this weird presence on the road because of its boxiness, but it's smaller in most dimensions than a lot of other trucks out there. It's definitely shorter than a Silverado EV. It's narrower than a Silverado EV. It's actually narrower than the Rivian. And the cargo bed is very strangely shaped in the Cybertruck. It has kind of a wide at the top, kind of invert lampshade kind of thing going on. And then because of the way that the seating arrangement in the back impacts the cargo bed, when people say the Cybertruck's bed is bigger than a Lightning's bed, they're talking about a dimension that you could not put a box in. Like if you're putting one sheet of something, yes, you could put a bigger sheet of something in that's maybe an inch tall in the Cybertruck than in the Lightning, but you could not put a bigger crate in the Cybertruck versus the Lightning. So these are all kind of interesting variations of size.
Yeah. I'll also say that some of those mid-sized trucks also have the same payload capabilities as these half-ton EVs. So, yep.
Yeah. Let's see. If we go, here's a plug-in driver who owned an EV, not a training wheels person, combined range 600 miles. That's true. That's the one problem with a lot of EVs is that for the occasional person that needs 600 miles of range, you're dragging around a big battery that you don't need. Whereas a plug-in hybrid, yes, you're still burning gasoline, and even if you wanted to stop burning gasoline for whatever reason, you might want to do that. You've still burnt an awful lot less and consumed less resources by having this sort of backup plan thing. My big thing with the backup plan in the trucks is why just can't they make it more efficient?
No, and that's fair. And for me, really, it is a resource management conversation. And not only is there not one answer, but everybody is going to have a different application that makes more sense for them. And so for me, when I look at my truck use, so I have a truck, I have a 94 Chevy pickup, and I only drive it when I need to. And sometimes I need to make sure I've driven it. So I've got my Tesla, which is one of the most efficient, especially for the dollar, EVs on the market. And then I've got my rather inefficient pickup truck, but they live two very different lives. And I've got kind of both ends of that spectrum covered. If you're trying to do everything at once, there's always going to be compromises. But for me, I would rather have, even though it's two powertrains, you can still get a much lighter vehicle with a small generator and a normal size battery that would fit most people's daily driving. So, and again, I'm not immediately in the market for one, and I don't know how many people actually would be, but this is in my head how it all plays out. Sales will answer the question. We just don't have a plug-in truck yet to answer that.
I am just curious why this is an unanswerable question at this moment, why the consumer at this point in time seems to be interested in an EV with a backup plan feel rather than something that is similar in feel but could be greater in efficiency. There is this core group of customers out there that's like, I just want a generator on board. And they fixate on this, like, I want the generator thing, just this EV with a generator. When you're like, well, if in a rational world, you were targeting optimal performance and efficiency on these both, there's no reason that the Ram Charger could not have been designed with a mechanical connection between that front motor and its reduction gear and the gasoline engine. Because they could have had just a prop shaft in there, a gearbox that could bypass the motor generator unit or include it, whichever one they wanted to do, and drive the front wheels with maybe one or two fixed ratios. So that way, when you're out on the open highway and you're just cruising along and your battery is depleted, it could be a 260 horsepower front wheel drive pickup truck with like 2 direct drive ratios. That's entirely doable. And in a rational world, that would have been more efficient.
Right. And Jim, we do hear you. I think for me, my priority in any of these configurations would just be that for most everyday driving, you get all the benefits of an EV, which are your instant acceleration, good regenerative braking. You want enough power to be able to operate as a true EV and then have the backup plan. That's just where the split generally isn't. So I harken right back to the i3 Rex, where when that generator is not running, you know you're driving an electric vehicle. Obviously, there is a compromise when that little itty bitty generator kicked up because you lost a lot of power. But when you look at most other plug-in hybrid systems, the overall horsepower number is based on the addition of the gasoline engine. And when you're in EV mode, you're operating at a third or a quarter of the total power. And that's probably enough for your daily driving, but it takes away some of the spirit and enjoyment that you can get from all that torque.
Yeah, I think Ram could have kept the power numbers exactly as they are in Ram Charger and spent more R&D money. And I'm assuming it's just they were cheap. But I think that with more R&D time and investment in that plug-in hybrid system, they could have had the best of both worlds, kept the EV performance while also enabling a much more efficient hybrid drive mode, which they claim they intend to be used on a regular basis because they claim this is the EV for weekend warrior, people that want to go out on the road trip, that want to tow that trailer every weekend, etc. And that was kind of what surprised me when you talk to the Ram people. They weren't saying this is a backup plan. They weren't like this is an occasionally used thing.
Right.
They were like, no. We see this being used a lot. We see you driving every day electric only on your commute, and then you hook up a trailer and you drive 600 miles on your V6. And I'm like, okay, well, if you're doing that, then your fuel economy is so bad.
Yeah.
over there that what have we done? So we'll see. We'll just have to see how bad it is. But
and I will say, yes, there are definitely things Ram could have done differently with this design. We are both very excited to see how it all implements itself. I want to see, and this is just what's in my head. I want to know what plug-in hybrid truck and whatever the EV range is from 50 to 150, whatever plug-in truck will also have the towing capacity or the payload capacity for me to go ahead and slide in a little camper shell, not a full slide-in camper, and I can go anywhere, anytime, run any. I can have my electric out in the middle of nowhere because I'm running my gas as the generator. I want to know who's making that truck, and that's the race. It's right now between Ram Charger and the Scout Terra. We'll see who wins because I want more EV range.
I have the suspicion that if that's what you're interested in, we will see something like that from Ford first. Rumor mill seems to be that Ram Charger will not, by default, allow a slide-in.
I'm talking about baby slide-in, so it's really more of a
depends though, because like you can't do a slide-in in your Silverado EV, Sierra EV, etc. Like they tell you no. People do it, right? And it is my recollection that Ford also says no to Lightning, but there has been more interest in Lightning and more work around that. And Ford just builds the most trucks, so I would assume that we might see something like that from Ford because there is a lot of commercial interest in a plug-in hybrid work truck. So we'll see how that goes. But last question before we go, and I think this one's an easy. Do we think the Dodge Charger EV will sell well? No.
Nope.
But I think the gasoline one will sell just fine. So
yes. You've driven the Charger, or you've seen the Charger.
I sold the drove the Charger EV. The gasoline one's coming up later. 4-doors coming later. Gas one's coming later. The Banshee one, that's coming later. But nutshell, EV version, no. Think the gas one will sell just fine.
Yep, sounds good.
But everybody, see everybody sometime later. Don't forget to check out the podcasts, the other channels, hit the subscribe buttons, find us on the Facebooks, the Blue Skies, the Twitters, the X's, the Y's and the Z's, and see you later.
And have a good weekend.
And stay away from those In-N-Out fries, because
bye everyone.